The Fisherman and His Wife. Once upon a time, there was an old fisherman who lived with his wife in a dirty little house. They were very poor. One day, the fisherman caught a big flounder.
My wife will be happy with me. This flounder will make a nice dinner for us. We will eat well today.
But before he could take the flounder off the hook, he heard the flounder talking to him.
Please don't kill me. I am really a prince, and if you let me go, I will grant you a wish.
A talking fish? I cannot eat such a magical fish. Here, let me throw you back into the water.
When the fisherman got home that day, his wife was waiting for him. She looked angry.
I see you caught nothing for us to eat. What are we going to do now?
I did catch a big flounder, but he turned out to be a magical fish. He told me that he was really a prince, and he told me that if I let him go, he would grant me a wish.
Well, did you make a wish?
No, I didn't. I just threw him back into the water.
Why didn't you ask for a new house? This old house is falling apart. Go back to the flounder and ask him to give us a new house.
The fisherman did not want to bother the flounder, but he did go back to the river because he wanted to make his wife happy. When he got to the river, he called out to the flounder.
Fisherman, what is it that you want?
Please give my wife a new house.
Your wish is granted. Now go home.
When the fisherman got home, he saw a nice new house. It was much larger and cleaner than the little house they lived in before.
Are you happy now, dear wife?
This house is nice, but why shouldn't I have a castle? Go at once and ask the flounder for a castle.
But this is such a nice house.
The fisherman did not want to go back to the flounder, but his wife kept arguing with him until he agreed to go back to the river. He called the flounder.
I gave you a new house. Now what do you want?
My wife wants a castle.
Very well. Your wish is granted. Go back home to your wife.
When the fisherman got home, he saw that there was a large castle where his house once stood.
I can't live in a castle and not be the queen. Go back to the flounder and tell him to make me a queen.
Dear wife, you asked for a castle, and now we're living in a castle. Why aren't you happy?
I must be a queen. I can't be happy until I can be a queen. Now go back to the flounder.
But the fisherman did not want to go to the flounder again, but he wanted to make his wife happy. And so the fisherman went back to the river and called for the magical flounder again.
Your wife now has a castle, so why are you here?
You gave us a castle, but now my wife says she must be a queen.
Very well. Your wife is now a queen. Go back home, fisherman.
When the fisherman returned to the castle, he saw his wife sitting on a large throne with a golden crown on her head. Servants stood by her side to get whatever she wanted.
You must now be very happy.
Now that I am queen, I must also be the empress. I must have power to rule over many subjects. Go to the flounder and tell him that I need to be made an empress.
The fisherman went back to the river sadly. He could not disobey the orders of the queen. He called the flounder again.
Please grant me one more wish. The queen wishes to be made empress to rule over all her subjects.
Go back to your wife at once, and you will find her to be an empress.
When the fisherman went home once again, he found that his wife was now the empress. Dukes and ladies, kings and queens bowed down to her.
Husband, this is not enough. I must have power over the sun and the moon, over everything in the universe. Go back to the flounder at once and demand that I become God.
I can't do that.
Go at once.
Afraid of his wife, the fisherman ran to the river to call the flounder again.
Flounder, flounder, I have one more wish.
What do you want from me now? Haven't I given you everything you need and more?
Oh, flounder, the empress now says that she must become the ruler of the sun and the moon. She wants to be God of all creation.
The flounder shook its head.
I cannot grant your wish. She has asked for too much. Instead of being God, you will find your old wife living in your old house.
And that is exactly how the fisherman found his wife when he went home. And they are still living in the dirty little house to this day.
Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there lived a poor woodcutter and his wife. His wife was a stepmother to his 2 children, whose names were Hansel and Gretel. They were very poor and did not have much to eat. One day, the poor woodcutter said to his wife,
"We have almost no more food for our family. I'm afraid we will all die."
The woodcutter's wife said to him,
I know what we must do. We must get rid of Hansel and Gretel. We have just enough food for you and me to live. But we cannot take care of your children, too. We'll take them into the forest with a little bread. We will build a fire for them and leave them there.
"I can't leave them in the forest. They will be killed by wild animals,"
said the woodcutter.
You must,
said the wife angrily. The poor woodcutter could not argue with his wife. He was afraid of her. Hansel and Gretel were in their beds and heard what their father and stepmother said. "I'm scared," said Gretel.
Don't worry, little sister,
said Hansel.
I'm sure God will take care of us.
After the woodcutter and his wife had gone to sleep, Hansel quietly slipped out of the house. He went outside and filled his pockets with small white stones. When morning came, the woodcutter said,
"Today we are going deep into the forest to cut some wood. Get your things. Here is some bread. Put it in your pockets."
Hansel gave Gretel his own bread because his own pockets were full. So Hansel and Gretel got their old coats and hats and followed their father into the forest. As they walked along, Hansel stopped every now and then and looked in the direction of his home. Every time he did that, he dropped one small white stone on the ground.
"Why do you keep stopping and looking back?"
the father asked.
Oh, for no reason. I thought I saw a squirrel sitting on our roof,
said Hansel. The woodcutter did not know that Hansel was dropping little white stones along the way. And so they walked in the forest for many hours. Finally, the woodcutter stopped and said,
"Here is a nice place to rest. Let's build a fire to keep warm. Why don't you lie down and rest here?"
said the woodcutter.
"I'm going to cut some more wood. I'll come back for you."
But the children knew that their father would not be back. And so Hansel and Gretel ate their bread and went to sleep in front of the fire. When they woke up, it was dark and the fire had gone out.
What will happen to us now?
asked poor Gretel. She was very afraid and began to cry.
Don't worry, dear sister,
said Hansel.
We will find our way back home.
But how will we do that? We're so far away from home, said Gretel.
I dropped white stones along the way so we could follow them back to our home,
said Hansel. How smart you are, Hansel, said Gretel. Holding hands, Hansel and Gretel followed the stones back to their home. When they arrived, the woodcutter and his wife were surprised. The woodcutter was very happy to see his children and hugged them. He really did not want to leave his children in the forest. But the stepmother was very angry. She locked Hansel and Gretel in their rooms that night. She said to her husband,
You will have to take them farther into the forest tomorrow. This time, make sure they can't get back.
"Please, wife, don't make me do this,"
said the poor woodcutter.
"How can I leave my children to die?"
But the wife argued with him all night long. The poor woodcutter became very tired, and so he agreed to take Hansel and Gretel back into the forest. Because they were locked in their rooms, Hansel could not fill his pockets with white stones this time. When morning came, Hansel and Gretel were given the last piece of bread in the house, They got their coats and hats and set out with their father again. As they walked, Hansel took little pieces of bread and dropped them on the ground. But he did not know that there were hungry birds in the forest that ate up the little pieces of bread Hansel left behind. The woodcutter took the children even deeper into the forest. After a while, he stopped and said,
"This is a good place to rest. Stay here while I finish chopping wood. I will come back for you."
The woodcutter walked away sadly. Hansel and Gretel fell asleep on the ground because they were very tired from walking. When they woke up, it was very dark. "What are we going to do now?" asked Gretel.
"I've dropped little pieces of bread along the way,"
said Hansel.
"Come follow me."
But when Hansel looked for the little pieces of bread, he could not find any. The hungry birds had eaten all of them. Gretel began to cry.
"Don't worry, little sister,"
said Hansel.
"God will take care of us. Let's walk a little and see what we can find."
And so, holding hands, Hansel and Gretel walked on. The forest was very dark. They found a large hole at the bottom of a tree and crawled inside. They fell asleep, cold and hungry. The next morning they walked on. Soon they found a little house. And what a special house this was! It was all made of cookies and candy.
"Look at this wonderful house,"
said Gretel.
"I wonder if I could eat some of this window pane. I'm so hungry." "You try it, and I will try some of the roof,"
said Hansel. As they were eating, an old witch came out of the house. She had been watching Hansel and Gretel eat pieces of her house. The old witch had made the house out of sweet things to trap children. She was an evil witch.
"Come inside, my children,"
said the old witch in a nice voice,
"and I will give you something even better to eat." "Yes, thank you. You are very kind to help us,"
said Hansel. "I hope we didn't make you angry by eating your house," said Gretel.
"Not at all,"
said the old witch.
"I love children, and I love sweet children like yourselves. Now come in."
Hansel and Gretel thought that the old witch was very kind. But the witch was not kind at all. She was an evil witch. Once inside the house, the witch said,
"Now I have you. I will make you fat and eat you."
The old witch locked Hansel up in a room and had Gretel do housework for her. The witch took food to Hansel every day to make him fat.
"Let me feel your finger to see how fat you're getting,"
the witch would say to Hansel. But Hansel was a smart boy. When the witch asked him for his finger, Hansel gave her a chicken bone to feel. The witch could not see very well.
"That's strange,"
the witch would say.
"You're eating a lot, but you're still very skinny."
Many days went by, and the witch was getting angry.
"I I have been giving you lots of food, and you are not getting fat at all,"
shouted the evil witch.
"but I will wait no longer. I'm getting very hungry."
The old witch ordered Gretel to put lots of wood in the oven to heat it up. It was a large oven.
"Open the oven door and check to see if it's hot enough,"
said the witch to Gretel. But Gretel said, "I don't know how to do that." The witch said angrily,
"You stupid girl! Let me show you how it is done."
And when the witch opened the oven door and stuck her head in, Gretel gave her a big push from behind. The bad witch tumbled inside the oven. Gretel quickly shut the door and locked it. Then she ran to the room where Hansel was locked and freed him. They were so happy to see each other again. Hansel and Gretel quickly gathered all the food they could find. In a large wooden chest, they also found lots of gold coins and jewelry. They carried as much as they could in their pockets, and then they set out to find their father's home. Several days later, by luck, they found their home again. They ran into the house. The woodcutter was so happy to see them again.
"I will never leave you again,"
the father said, crying. His wife had died while Hansel and Gretel were away. Hansel and Gretel showed him all the gold coins and jewelry they brought from the evil witch's home.
"Look, Father, we're rich now. You don't have to cut wood anymore,"
they said. And they all lived happily ever after.